Good evening. Would you stand with me for the invocation and pledge of allegiance, please? Councilman Rogers.
Let's pray. Our God, our Father in heaven, we thank you for this day, for the blessings you've given to each and every one of us here. We pray tonight that you'll be with us as we go about the business of the city. We pray that what we do will always be beneficial to those citizens that we represent. We continue to pray for those serving the armed forces abroad, serving harm's way. Be with them, guard them, protect them. These things we pray in Christ's name, and amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This evening we have 3 people that have signed up to speak. So Henry, you will be first.
Henry Sasson, Vienna. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
just
cool.
speak directly into it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Much better? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. Couple topics. First one I wasn't planning on, but it came over the news. I don't know if you guys seen it yet or not, but at 6 o'clock they were talking about Sherrod Brown and Shelley-Moore Capito. We're talking about PFSA or AS testing standards and all that stuff. So there's more to come. So that was just hit on the news at like 6:05 before I came down here. So just a heads up. Last city council meeting, it was brought up about the deer population again. I don't know if anybody's looked into this yet or not, but I'm a member of the hunting club up at Sistersville, up at our plant, and we had issues with deer getting hit on the road all the time. And what we ended up doing was, since we have a lot of property up there, we put in food plots. And we needed to, as the membership, we went ahead and tossed in our dues money and then planted the crop. The local farmer that cuts the grass up there for hay and stuff tilled it over, seeded it. And for the next 3 years, I believe, we only allowed for does to be taken off the property. So we thinned the herd, plus we were doing the food plots. So I don't know if McDonough would be willing to do something like that, you know, on the other side of Rosemar to plant. So if you can feed them, that's what they're coming for, all the, you know, tasty little flowers and stuff. So I don't know if anyone's, Chief, I don't know if you guys looked into that or you talked to the DNR guy about that, but food plots, they work. I mean,
Did you ever go to a zoo?
excuse me?
Did you ever go to a zoo?
All the time.
Did you take your rifle there to kill the deer, or did you take your rifle there to kill the lion? McDonough is a wildlife sanctuary.
I'm not.
McDonough is a wildlife sanctuary. We've talked to the DNR. I've been there. Deputy Stevens, who's the sheriff of Wood County, has talked to the DNR. There's 3 acres you have to have, and it has to be bow season. And we've talked about it over and over again.
I am not
and
talking about hunting at
the chief of police is
McDonough.
also going back again, and now we're negotiating with Ohio Valley College. McDonough is a wildlife sanctuary. You're the one that mentioned it, okay? Not me.
I didn't say hunting. I said McDonough, that property, there's like a pasture where the guy has grass. I'm just talking about putting in food plots to feed the deer on that side. I'm not talking about going over there to shooting them.
Well, if you look behind you, number 3 up there says, do not feed deer, or hopefully we'll pass that tonight, and we'll keep the people from feeding the deer here.
I understand
Now, we
that.
put a pond in McDonough Wildlife Area so that they would have water over there before there wasn't water. So we're hoping to keep them over there, but they have a mind of their own, and they're going to go anywhere they want to.
I'm well aware of that. And what we've noticed up on Route 2 is the number of deer killed around our plant property, because we have almost 2,000 acres up there, has gone down. We thinned out the herd. I'm saying, I'm not talking about thinning the herd out over there. I'm talking about if you move the food source or the majority of the food, maybe they'll leave this area and go over there.
Move the food source by trying to get the people here from not feeding them.
Yeah. The other comment is, you may want to touch base with the city of Weirton. Going through it, it's my hometown, they had the same type of problem. And they opened up deer hunting, and they went through and they talked to Williams Country Club. And they did it where it was early morning hours, late evening hours, and the city worked with the country club up there. And if a deer was harvested, the carcasses and everything would be removed. It did a service. You got Williams, you got Parkersburg Country Club. I don't know if they're willing to do something like that, but there are other options out there. So I'm just saying, if you change the location of food, look at some other stuff, just food for thought. That was my second topic. When last meeting, they were talking about upcoming discussions for city raises and so forth. One of the things that we ought to look at is, I know myself as working for a chemical company, and I know there's probably a lot of people out there that did work as well. They probably didn't see merit increases to the extent that the merit increases are happening. I know that people that are seniors are on merit base for COLAs, for increases every year based on inflation. Raising salaries is, you know, from a standpoint on one end is good, but you also got to be able to look and say, does this justify such increases year after year after year? Working where I've worked, I've been with the company going to be 31 years behind me come this June. There is salary compressions. Raises don't always meet or cover inflation. That's just a fact of life. Going through, as the city believes that they're always going to try to keep your base there, cover inflation, and keep growing, then I don't see how you sustain something like that. That's just my 2 cents worth. Thanks.
Henry, can you clarify something
Yep,
for
go
me?
ahead.
I didn't understand. Did you say mirror increases, or what was it?
Merit.
Merit.
M-E-R-I-T.
M-E-R-I-t.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I thought you said mirror.
No,
I didn't
merit.
understand. Okay,
Merit.
thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Greg?
Greg Frazier, 1210 22nd Street here in Vienna. I promise I won't ask any deer questions. I do have some questions about the Manville report last week, or last council meeting. I wasn't here, I was on vacation, but I did watch it on live stream. The first one is to you, Mr. Mayor, where the Manville cost breakdown, and I hope I pronounced this gentleman's name, Melvin Eves,
Yes.
received $70,000 for his loss from possible sale of scrap. Is that correct?
No, sir, that is not correct.
What's the reason for that?
Mr. Eves was the gentleman that had the demolition contract for that site, but they made a mistake when they drew the contract up for him, and it had no time limits. So he could have taken 10 years, and there was nothing that we could do in order to speed that up. So we had to buy him out in order to start the remediation on that project.
Okay. Then the city had to sell scrap of 27,000 some change. Is that correct?
Yes.
So did we lose $42,000 on that transaction?
The scrap that was sold there, the $27,000, was the scrap that came out of the steel that was, when we took the property down, Mr. Harper took all the trash out to the landfill. All of the steel, we ended up selling that and whatever was there. But that didn't include all of the other metal that was in the warehouse section of that. That was part of the remediation under the Brownsfield. And so when they took all of that, they got the steel from that.
So who got the 70,000? I mean, that Mr. Eves would have sold. Who sold that?
No, Mr. Eves was not paid $70,000 for the value of what was there. We did not have a guesstimate. We had a guesstimate, but we did not have actual numbers because we bought him to make him go away. Basically, we were not going to wait 10 years.
So it wasn't for scrap then?
It was. He had the salvage rights for the whole section of the industrial side.
I'm a little confused, but I'll have to think on that some more. Mr. Leach, about the land use covenant, I'm trying to understand this. What will be the restrictions that the WVDEP will put on that?
Well, the first, that's yet to be determined by the final approval on the work plan. But first of all of that site, just like all of Vienna, you're prohibited from drilling wells for groundwater, okay? And that's with respect to the plume from the dry cleaning. And so one land use covenant is that you can't drill wells for groundwater. The second land use covenant on the riverside, because we don't know on the production side yet, will be and I don't have the map in front of me, but I'm going to say 5 sites. Like we've completed, as of today, we've completed capping 3 sites, one 20 foot by 20 foot, one 30 foot by 30 foot, one 40 foot by 70 foot. Those 3 sites, at the bottom of where we excavated, there were markers placed, and if you excavate below that, you have to contact the DEP. There were also, I'm going to say, 2 sites or 3 sites that are under the parking lot, and this is all to do with arsenic, which is naturally occurring, but over the de minimis level. Same thing. Those sites, they'll be GPS marked, and so like so, for example, if you do development or whatever, we'd contact the DEP and say we would need to do this, and we'll do the same procedure we did. That a remediation specialist would be there, supervise the excavation. You can't cross-contaminate dirt, stuff like that. So there's about 5 sites there on land use covenant that if they are to be disturbed for any reason, development or whatever, it'll just have to be supervised and done in accordance to those procedures. But so that's it.
Okay. The other part of the question, I want to make sure I get it clear in my mind. Once the manufacturing parcel is if it's sold, will the city have any kind of financial responsibility if there is an environmental cleanup later on down the road? Once we sell the property, are we done with it?
Yes, because when you transfer the property, okay, the land use covenants,
Goes with it.
all right, transfer with the deed, and so those would remain. So, for example, in the production side, again, I don't know if you caught this, but we're thinking we're not even going to have to do a risk assessment. That we're going to have to do a couple of things similar to what we did on the riverside, then put those land use covenants, and then that will run with the land, so to speak, or go with the deed. Okay, and so for example, there were a couple of spots with arsenic that are under concrete. So if a developer came in and decided that they wanted to remove the concrete pad and do total development, then they would have the same responsibility. They would have to adhere to land use covenant, and it would be their responsibility. The city would not have any, and that would be, because I've done real estate transactions where these kinds of impacted properties are transferred, and those responsibilities run with the land and go to the new owner. So if the city sells the production side, whomever would purchase it would be responsible to comply with the land use covenants, and it would be and will be done. Yes.
City would. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Kim.
Good evening. Kim Williams. I live on 49th Street in Vienna. So I was here about a month ago, and I asked that the council make the full agendas available prior to the city council meetings so they can be reviewed by anybody interested. Honestly, I don't think that that's any big deal. Parkersburg makes theirs available not only for their council meetings but also any of their committee meetings. They make those available 5 days before their council meeting. They make it available when their agenda comes out. But for whatever reason, our situation here has gotten worse. So instead of being able to get those agendas, we now have to FOIA them. So here's tonight's agenda. Here's my copy. It was FOIA'd. Freedom of Information Act. We have to use the Freedom of Information Act to get a current agenda, the documents that support that agenda, the resolutions and the ordinances. So that's a complete waste of time to have to FOIA something and pay for it. I just don't understand why it's such a hassle to get the agenda with the documentation. So I mean, if you don't have anything to hide, which I'm sure you don't, then why act like it? So tonight I'm calling on council to sponsor a resolution allowing the documents for the upcoming agendas to be disclosed to the public on the day the agenda comes out. If the documents aren't available, then the council really isn't ready for the question. So I hope that will be considered. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Kim, I'd like to answer part of that for you.
Sure.
Maybe it'll give you a little better understanding. I'm not sure if you were here 2 weeks ago, but someone got up and spoke and said that we were being unfair in the way that we handled things.
I remember that.
And so the situation is, after that meeting, a gentleman in here asked me for a copy of one of the sheets that I had put up on the board. I had it in my hand, okay? It was a very simple thing to walk in, hit the Xerox machine, and simply hand it to him. Question asked, question answered, right? But now that we've been accused of treating people differently, we have to hold the same standard for everyone. And so unfortunately, because of those comments and the fact that we try to be fair, there is nothing to hide about that stuff.
Well,
Okay? Excuse me. The fact of the matter is, from now on, if you request something, you will have to do it as a FOIA, because we have to be the same to everyone. Because if we give you whatever it is, and then this other person takes exception and says, hey, they charge me for that every time, I'm not going to be caught in that situation. So because our hand is being forced here, that's the only option I have, is to say, if you want it and you want a copy of it, then you have to pay the 25 cents per sheet that our ordinance and everything that we do has to be adhered to.
okay.
I don't like it. There's some things that are just so easy, like when he asked me for that piece of paper. My golly, it just took me 10 seconds. Done. All right? But if I treated him better than I treated you or this other person, it wasn't intentional. It was just simply, here it is. Okay?
Okay.
A lot of the things that you asked for, not you specifically, but a lot of the things that are being asked for are things that have to be accumulated over a period of years. We had a FOIA we had a request that came in, and the person wanted 5 years worth of information. When they didn't receive it, that same afternoon, it was then turned into a FOIA. I can't gather 5 years worth of information in 6 hours. It doesn't work that way. So, unfortunately, in order to play by the same standard that's set for everyone, if you have a request for information or a document, you're going to have to do it as a FOIA so that we play by the same set of rules. Because I don't want someone thinking that you're getting special treatment.
Okay, so I understand the difference between a FOIA and really what I'm asking for, which is the open documents that have to do with an open meeting that's about to happen in a few days. I think that FOIA request was absurd from what was done before. That's not what I'm asking for, and it's also my understanding that council can make a resolution allowing us to have the full documents before the agenda. That's all I'm asking for. It's very simple. It shouldn't be confused with what using the Freedom of Information Act. So I'm asking council to do that. I understand if I wanted 5 years of records for something, who knows what, that would require a FOIA, and I understand that. That's not what I'm asking for. These records are already produced. You're getting ready to have your meeting. Parkersburg does it. It's not a big deal. And if the council would go ahead and pass a resolution, then there's no problem. So.
Can I just answer one thing so we're not confusing issues? All right, there's a difference between the legal requirement for an agenda and some of the other things that well, I'll just say you specifically are asking for. Under the Open Meetings Act, the statute specifically requires that the agenda, which is whatever form the governing body decides to take, just have certain things specifically listed in it. 1, the date of the meeting. 2, its location. And 3, a relatively specific notice to the public of what the agenda is going to be. The Open Meetings Act sets out by example what an agenda item is, and you can refer to it by title. Now, the thing that you're asking for is separate from the agenda. Those are the supporting documents, the actual substantive resolution or what have you. Based on how the Open Meetings Act is written, that's not something that a city is required to do.
I understand that.
Right. And if it's just like everything else in government, particularly at a local level, it's open to a lot of interpretation and different implementations. Parkersburg chooses to do it that way, and for good or bad, that's how they do it. Certain boards of education will put their agenda and they'll post a 16-page item out front. It just happens that the city of Vienna has, for as long as the city of Vienna has been around, has done the agendas the way that you're asking. So it's not even a matter of whether or not you're entitled to them. At this point, until the documents become part of the record or until the supporting documents become part of the record and are reviewed and discussed by council, there's an argument there that they're not even public records. But what you're asking is simply for the city of Vienna to change that policy.
Yeah, it's real simple.
Right, I understand that. But I'm just saying at this point, because I don't want anybody to be confused, my opinion is that the way the city has been promulgating its agenda is in compliance with the state statute. The change that you've suggested would also be in compliance with the state statute. So it's up to council to decide how it wants to do that. But-
Correct.
okay.
I'm familiar with the statute. I've read it many times. That's why I'm requesting that council do the right thing here and make those documents available. Because we should have an opportunity as citizens to read those agendas, the full documents. We had an agenda item that was so vague a couple months ago or whenever it was, TIF, Grand Central Mall. No, that was so vague that the public couldn't adequately decide what that was about. And this just continues to be on these agendas. So if you're going to have vague agenda items and then no supporting documents, then that's not really fair to the public to not be able to know what's going on in the city. And like I said, there's nothing to hide. So why is it a big deal? So that's my request to council. I hope you'll take it under consideration. Thank you.
I'd like to call to order this regular session of the Vienna City Council for May the 23rd, 2019. Let the record reflect that I've taken roll, that all members of council, with the exception of Councilman Conley, are present. Having a quorum, we will proceed. The minutes from the regular council meeting held on May the 9th have been printed, posted, and circulated. Are there any corrections to the minutes? If there are no objections, then the minutes will stand approved as posted. The report of the treasurer will be given at the first meeting in June. We have no unfinished business this evening, so we move right on to new business. The first item on our agenda this evening under new business is a resolution establishing a salary increase for full-time permanent employees. I'll read the resolution. Be it resolved by the Common Council of the City of Vienna that all full-time permanent employees shall receive a wage increase for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020 as follows. All full-time permanent employees shall receive an hourly wage increase of 65 cents in addition to the annual hourly longevity increase of 35 cents per hour, which is a total of $1 per hour. All full-time permanent police officers shall receive an hourly wage increase of $1.65 per hour in addition to the annual hourly longevity increase of 35 cents per hour, which is a total of $2 per hour. This wage increase is for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. All increases are effective beginning July 1st, 2019. I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the resolution establishing salary increases for full-time permanent employees.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we establish salary increases for full-time permanent employees. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I got a question or a statement. I'm not against employee raises whatsoever. I'm against the method we use. We used this last year with employee raises. So, these people got a $2,080 raise at the minimum. And then we do it again this year, for $2,080, on a 40-hour work week. Raises are earned and not just handed out. I believe in the continuous improvement process. Across the board raises give no incentive for improving. So I'm against that. I don't like the idea of just flat out giving people, because I know I talked to a gentleman at the last council meeting, he was going back to get some certification. I mean, reward that guy. So you're taking away the guys who hump it every day at work, and every employer has this. You got guys who just get enough to get by, and you got guys who do above and beyond. And by doing these across the board raises, it doesn't make sense because there's no incentive to do better than what you're doing. I know that, Randy Rapp, you're a former business owner, and for me to this is not our money, this is the citizens of Vienna's money, and I haven't had anybody support. People are getting raises, I'm sure they're fine with this stuff, but the citizens of Vienna don't like the idea. I've had no one speak to me personally about liking the idea of giving raises. I'm all for the police officers. We don't pay our police officers enough. I love to see them give them more. But as far as giving everyone the same incentive raise for the second straight year, and this will probably come up again next year, I just don't like the idea of the process that we're using. So I hope we vote against it, but it'll probably pass, as most things do. But I'm against this, to have this form of doing this stuff.
Yes, sir, Bruce.
What bothers me more than anything is when I taught school, every year, the first day of school, we sent out forms for parents to fill out for free and reduced lunch. And I was extremely upset. At that time, I was not a councilman, but I got back every year a lot of students who were employees of this city whose parents made or were eligible for reduced lunch or free lunch. And we have low salaries, and I don't know they don't make $100 an hour like a lot of other people do. And I don't know how many people do make that amount of money. We've talked about the police fee, reducing it because people at McDonald's can't pay that much money for it. So, our employees are basically in the same boat. And I can't see why people would begrudge our employees. They work hard for the city and for everyone here, and they do some things that you wouldn't catch me doing. I mean, when they have to dive down in 10 feet of water to fix a water leak, and they have to get a belt, the weight from the pool so that they could be held down when they do it, you wouldn't catch me doing that. Or, sewer leaks. How many people want to wait in sewer waste and when the lines break? There's not too many people that want to do that, and our employees do it because they have to do it as a job for the city. And as far as I'm concerned, they deserve everything that they can get. Thank you.
That's what I'm saying. There's people that do that, but then there's people who don't do that. So that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying the whole process is not working. I don't think it's a good process because, let's say, the guy who dived down in the sewer you're talking about is not the same guy who doesn't want to do it. So it's just my opinion. So, you have your opinion, I have mine. So
I have a brief comment as well. So, with respect to the raises, incremental raise, the longevity raise is 35 cents of this $1 raise, so it's actually 65 cents, as the mayor noted. We've also discussed 3 employees who we are proposing a merit-based raise. But to me, it keeps coming to quality of life and the return of value that our city employees give. And I just, I continually look at this stuff. Best places to live. Vienna is a town in West Virginia, population of 10,500. Vienna is one of the best places to live in West Virginia. Living in Vienna offers residents a suburban feel. Most residents own their homes in Vienna. There are a lot of restaurants, coffee shops, and parks. Many young professionals, retirees live in Vienna, and residents tend to be conservative. The public schools in Vienna are above average. So the quality of life in Vienna relative to the rest of West Virginia is above average. A lot of the credit for that goes to the city employees, the longevity of the employees that we have in this city. As a private business person, I try to give our employees incremental raises every year. And then I also give merit-based raises, and I think that's what we're considering here. So the fact that it's happened in 2 years, and I don't have this history in front of me, but my guess is we haven't given a dollar raise every year for the last 15 years or whatever. And when we look at the average salary and the total compensation plan, we had the discussion about their health insurance. You know, when you add all of that up, the fact that the city of Vienna is not in the public employee retirement system, and in fact they're, you know, which of course Parkersburg and the county are. I mean, all of those things you have to take into consideration when you're looking at, first of all, what's the value of the service that our employees are giving to our citizens, and by all accounts, and this is not something written on our own website, okay? I'm just reading from general internet ratings of city in Vienna, or cities in West Virginia. So, you know, for those reasons, I don't think that giving somebody a 65-cent an hour raise a couple of years in a row, you look at the development that's going on in our area, you know, you've challenged the value of the economic development in this city, and yet and now our economic development is retiring. But, you know, the growth in Vienna far outpaces what's going on in most areas of West Virginia. And we don't have the oil and gas development here, which tends to be a resource curse in a lot of areas. But so for those reasons, I do support this resolution, and I do believe that our in total, and it's up to the department heads to measure the performance of those individual employees, and if they have subpar performers and employees, then it's their responsibility to take that corrective action. As a council, we have to, it's not our job to micromanage this. We have to measure the performance of the city employees as a whole, and again, it is by every measure that I review, and also my experience in living in Vienna is above average. So for those reasons, I support the resolution.
Mike, I just wanted to make one comment. When you talk about the system that we use, I know that you've only been on a couple years, but in the past we've had very lively discussions about the additional pay raise. Some years it comes in at 0. You know, the 35 cents is always there, but some years it's come in at 0, and some years it's come in at 15 cents, so that the employee's got a 50-cent raise. It just depends, but the process itself allows you as a council member to suggest whatever dollar amount that you are comfortable with as a pay raise for the city employees, and then it's discussed as to where it goes. In the particular budget that we just passed recently, the 65 cents and the 35 cent was the only number that was discussed. So if you weren't comfortable with that, you have every opportunity to say, I'd like to reduce that to 25 cents, or I'd like to make it 75 cents. So the system's there. And I believe that if you ask any of the ones, you know, Roger or Bruce or Kathy that have been here a long time, it bounces every year. Sometimes it's based on the cost of living. Sometimes it's a Social Security rate. You know, you use all kinds of factors to figure out what's a fair number. And, you know, some years we just can't afford to do it. And so that's the discussion that we've had over the last 15 years that I've been here. And it's not an every year raise. So it does vary, and you have that opportunity next year to adjust it however you feel. Okay, is that fair?
Yeah, but still, Randy, it goes back to the point. I don't know how Craig Metz's employees perform. I don't know how Steve Black's employees perform. I mean, there's some that perform better than some that perform weaker, you know. So, but to say everyone gets the same raise, that's what I'm saying. To break this down even further, I mean, everyone has an evaluation. I mean, it's not up to me to tell how much this person is being raised. I mean, I'm not the department head, you know. That's why we have department heads in the city. You know, I don't know what their work performance is. My whole thing is not the financial part. I guess it kind of is, but the across the board stuff. That's what I'm talking about. I don't know why we continue to do the across the board raises for employees. So that's all I want to say. I mean,
Okay, no,
well, that's cool.
yep, fine. Any further discussion? Then I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the resolution establishing salary increases for full-time permanent employees in the total amount of $1 for the regular full-time permanent employees and $2 for the police officers, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? Let the record reflect it passed 5-1. Item number 2 is a resolution increasing the annual salary for the positions of Computer Science Administrator, Human Resources Director, and Community Event Planner Coordinator. Be it resolved by the Common Council of the City of Vienna that the salaries for the position of Computer Systems Administrator and Coordinator, Human Resources Director, and Community Events Planner Coordinator shall be increased effective July 1st in the amount of $3,500 per year. I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the resolution to increase the annual salaries of those positions.
I'll move that. So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we pass the resolution increasing the annual salary for the positions of Computer Systems Administrator, Human Resources Director, and Community Event Planning Coordinator. Is there any discussion?
Well, the way this is listed, obviously, we are voting on this as the group, not the positions. Is that correct?
It is, that's how it was listed on the resolution. I believe that if we have to, we can vote on them individually.
You can, well, yeah, you could vote on them individually. They're just noticed as such. If you want to change the resolution to do that, the resolution was just to do it originally drafted. Before I forget. It was originally drafted in totem, and that was the way I was asked to prepare it.
But if you would like to
Well-
vote individually, we can do that.
Yeah, if you want to modify them, you can make a motion to amend an individual position.
No, it's fine, but I have another question. We discussed this, and just I want to clarify. These positions, these proposed raises, was they on top of the dollar, or was that the total compensation suggested raise for these positions?
As it was presented, it would be on top of the dollar raise that was given.
So it would be the dollar raise plus the proposed
That is correct.
salary increase.
All the employees were voted the dollar raise, and then these three individuals are supposedly receiving an increase to bring their salaries in line with other salaries that the City of Vienna pays.
That's the way that this would work, because the city's already voted by resolution to increase the hourly rate for the individual employees, and then this would be in addition to that.
So these three people are getting a $5,580 raise, each individual. So that's times that by 3. So is that what we're saying? It's not $3,500, it's $5,580 raise.
If it passes, yes.
Well,
My understanding when we did this initially was that these were taken out of that, and those three would get the $3,500. The rest of this, all other full-time city employees would get the dollar. So that was my understanding.
that may have
so.
been the plan, but the way the resolution reads, the first increased everybody's salary, and then the second resolution will give the merit-based, I guess, raise to the three individual offices or positions.
I can't support that. That's crazy.
And again, you can make a motion to amend the amounts that are in there per position.
Oh, I'd definitely like, because, I mean, you're talking $5,500 raise for 3 people. Now, is it 3 people or is it 4? Because I know the IT had a second person also. Is it 3 or 4 people?
3.
So can we amend this one just to be the $3,500 for those 3?
Yes, you could, but you have to figure out what the math is going to be to get that to jibe. You've already, assuming that Mr. Elam's number is correct, that it's $1,500, you would have to you'd have to amend down the $3,500 to $2,000. Whatever the,
I'm not, I thought it was there again, the way it was done initially when we did the budget, that it was done for $3,500 for those 3 individuals. That was what they would receive, not as a full-time employee.
You could also table
That was separate.
you could also table the resolution tonight and then verify the issue with the finance director, and then represent it till the next, at the next council meeting. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
you have
see.
time until there's a July 1st implementation anyway.
Let's table this, yeah. I'll make a motion to table this until next council meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we table this until the next regular council session. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of tabling it, please signify by raising your right hand. Okay. All those opposed? Okay. It's tabled until the next regular session where you all can get your numbers together, and then we'll do it again. All right? The last item on our agenda this evening is an ordinance prohibiting the feeding of deer within the city limits. Mr. Elam, this is your ordinance. Would you care to give your feelings on this, please?
No, I thank you, Russ, for drawing this up. This is something, like I say, we've all had this issue since I've been here for 3 years, and there's no clear-cut answer. And I hope this making an ordinance, and we enforce this ordinance. Yes, Chief Pfeiffer, it's gonna be difficult. It's different, it's something we've never had before. But, the ordinance has, I would like to see the fines even stiffer than we have. Can I speak on this, Randy, or?
Yes, sir.
Because we have the $25 for the first offense, 50 for the second, and 100 fine for the third each subsequent offense. I just think it's too lenient. I mean, I apologize, I didn't get this done before the council meeting right now, but I would love to see maybe the first time give them a warning.
That's actually in there, the first paragraph D. Prior to the issuance of a complaint or citation for violation of the section, the city is required to issue
A warning.
written warning.
And then the $25, I mean, I think if we're going to really impact this, if really people are really going to be, gosh, it's against the law now, but it's only $25, I'll pay it. If you make that a $100 fine the very first time, you have to give them the warning. I would like to see that the fine stiffened, because I think, we have some serious deer issue in this town. We've talked about so many things for the years I've been here, and this is the first thing that actually is bitten, so now we can use this, and we put it in the newsletter, and we let people know, and I think, when they know they're breaking the law, I think it's going to have an effect. I really do, so I'm glad we've done this. But I would like to see that the penalties higher for the first offense. I mean, the first time you do, like I say, you get your warning, but each offense after that is the minimum $100 fine.
That's all you have to,
Kim Williams was talking about getting information. There's 4 files in my Dropbox. This ordinance is not in my Dropbox. I don't have it there. I have no information to speak about it, but I will say this, against feeding deer from the city people, okay? But there is nothing here telling me what is going on or anything about an ordinance dealing with this.
I can't talk about the Dropbox, but I did email it to all of the council members, and I may have your email address wrong.
Yeah, he
Dwayne
changed his
Flutie.
At one point, I'm not sure. If
Yeah,
it was-
Dwayne Flutie, Kevin Parrish, Steve Black, and Chief Pfeiffer. I sent this out earlier in the week. It might have been Monday.
I have a question for the chief. So with respect to what Henry Sasson was talking about, first of all, that's it's the first I've ever heard of that kind of an approach. And it seemed to make some sense based on the results he said over a period of time they've seen. What kind of problem with our deer population? I know I've heard mainly complaints about flowers being eaten, okay? But with respect to hazards to our citizens, deer strikes, I'm sure Rosemar is probably the most prevalent area. But otherwise, what kind of problem do we have, with deer in traffic?
Well, it's a problem. If you drive around after hours at night, there's nowhere in the city you're safe from shooting. It could be side streets, Grand Central, in front of the mall. We think of Rosemar just because of the McDonough Wildlife Refuge. And I mentioned it, Mr. Sasson, we brought that up, and I'm no wildlife expert, but I would be in fear that possibly deer would be coming from Jackson Park, where crossing Rosemar.
Crossing
to get to
Rosemar.
the food plot. So that could be a public safety
I obviously,
You hit them anywhere. I mean, they run right out in front of you. You could be going 15 mile an hour. A lot of times they run in right to the side of your car. So, they're prevalent.
thank you.
You know, we all know there's a deer problem in the city, and I'm not against ordinances or whatever to try to deal with it. What my concern is just how this is going to be enforced. I'm concerned about the enforceability of it. You know, I've read the proposal. I mean, I get it. I understand, but a couple questions come to mind. If someone's feeding a deer, does someone have to witness it? Does the police department have to witness it? Does animal control have to witness it? Who's it going to be reported to? Directly to our PD, to the 911 center? I mean, what PSAP's going to get these calls? I personally feel this is something that our police department should not be burdened with, but yet I don't feel like we have the animal control operation at this point to deal with it. So, you know, we have a lot of ordinances, in my opinion, that, you know, can't hardly be enforced, and I'm just wondering if this would not be another one. And I don't deny that there's a problem. I get it, I do. But I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure if it could be enforced enough to adequately deal with the problem.
And do we have a sense of what part of our population is actually actively, I mean, some people say I plant my flowers and the deer eat them. Are they feeding deer? You know, and so how often or do you hear about this? I mean, are they putting out salt blocks? I mean, what's going on? You know, they throw their scraps out the door. I mean, what does feeding the deer mean?
No, good, Chief. This ordinance, yeah, kind of defined it. The ordinance says it. So but the thing about, I know,
but my top question is, how many people in our community are actually doing this? That's my question.
Yeah,
I
I don't know. You know, that's one of those things about, just want to be optimistic about, yes, this might not help us at all, but it's showing we're making an effort with the deer population. That's my whole thing. I mean, this might not work at all, but at least it's showing we're making an effort, and it's going to deter some people. You know, when they find it's against the law to feed the deer, it's going to keep people from if it keeps one person from doing it. You know, I know I have a neighbor that feeds deer. You know, and that's you know, maybe deter them from feeding the deer. So that's the reason I drew this up or asked for us to draw this up. So it's not an answer at the end all, but it's an effort.
Chief Pfeiffer, I agree with Mr. Bibby. I don't want to see you burdened with something that is unenforceable. What is your opinion on this thing as far as how you would respond to calls or how you would expect to be alerted to this violation?
Well, a call typically is going to have to go to the 911 center. Police officer's going to get dispatched, unless it's something that the officer witnesses himself or a citizen, you know, approaches a police officer with, or comes in the police department. So, there's going to be, you know, some restrictions that go along with it, just like people have rights. And if it's something that needs investigated on their property and it's not, maybe it's not visible from the street or something like that. So there's a lot of things to consider here, from a legal standpoint. I'm not sure others suspending their driver's license, what if they don't pay it? They may not care if they get a fine.
And what would the burden of proof be, and would this be prosecuted in city court? And
It would have to be through municipal court.
all right, so people would have the right to defend. And
I also have a problem with the enforcing it. You know, I mean, how you really going to do that? I mean, if I just have an issue with that as well. Although I do agree with Councilman Bibby that there is a problem, you know, depending on the time of the year. Sometimes it's worse. Sometimes, you know, I had one jump out in front of me across Grand Central here a couple weeks ago. You know, it was dark and there it was, you know. That happens too. We live in West Virginia, you know. I mean, I just have an issue with being able to enforce that particular ordinance. My so.
I also do agree with Mike that, I mean, if we do this, that the penalties should be somewhat stiffer, in my opinion. I agree with that part of it if this is done. But once again, we got cat ordinances too. But I've got them all over my neighborhood, and I can't get rid of them, and none of them are mine, and I don't feed them.
When people let their cats out, they're supposed to be on leash. That's one
Well,
of
they
our
don't.
ordinances too. Well, I don't know how many people can get a cat on the leash. Mayor, may I go
I'll
to
get
the
them on a leash.
screen over here for a second?
Of course. Sure.
I don't know how many can see that. That's in my side yard. Do I believe there is a deer problem? Yes, I do. Okay? We had a senior talk to me the other day. She went out to get her paper in the morning. A deer was on her porch eating her flowers. Now, those flowers, are they considered food because they were eating it? I hope not. But anyway, I know there is a deer problem, okay?
But I don't want to put you on the spot, so if you don't feel comfortable answering this question, in the past you've made mention that you have a neighbor that feeds deer. How do they feed the deer? No, how? Do they have a big feeder? Do they put bags of corn out? What do they use?
She has a thing where, I haven't been to her front door, I don't wanna go there. She has a container on her front porch, she has like a can. She'll take that out, throw it out on the sidewalk. Or she'll take it out and pour it in a pile. Does at least of a morning and of an evening. She has a salt block down there, so is she feeding the deer? Yes, she is, she's intentionally feeding the deer. My neighbor right across the road from me got an apple tree in her backyard. That apple tree has apples with fall, deer eat them, but she's not feeding the deer. She's not feeding them, she's not throwing corn out to feed the deer.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Henry. Why not?
The whole thing about the enforcement, we always go to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and they have wild horses up in the 4x4 area where we stay. And it's tough for the authorities to enforce the law there. And the only way they're really able to do anything is with video. So whenever we're there, we say, hey, if you want to use the porch, the house we stay at, feel free. Because without that type of proof, as Jim would realize, it's tough to fight them in court.
Mr. Skogstad, any words of wisdom?
Well, it's always good that a ban on deer feeding ordinances can lead to us setting up cameras to videotape our neighbors. So I guess the law of unintended consequences strikes again. Yes, it's difficult this ordinance and just feeding deer in general is going to be difficult to prosecute. I'll be tasked with prosecuting violations. In my defense, I picked the numbers that I picked because, in my experience, generally the folks that are feeding deer, and pardon me for maybe stereotyping, but I think of my mother-in-law, who lives in Parkersburg, by the way, and this won't affect. Generally, they're older, very kind, nurturing ladies who probably $25 is not an insignificant sum. They're also not, at this point, committing the crime of the century in that they are just simply feeding not to sound condescending, but my wife says I can't help it, the pretty animals that come into their yard. Will it be difficult? Yes, and Mr. Sasson is correct. One of the biggest problems that we have with any of these ordinances, as Chief Pfeiffer can tell you, is you'll have neighbors that are certainly willing to call and complain about their neighbors feeding the deer, But when push comes to shove on Tuesday night, when I have to deal with them in city court, those neighbors won't appear. So what you're going to have is an officer, a police officer, an animal control officer, the parks director, or whomever else, and I just started putting people in here that I thought might be able to deal with the issue as it comes. Who are going to be writing citations for people that are going to be unenforceable. Or not, I shouldn't say unenforceable, that are going to be difficult to enforce either through the unwillingness of neighbors complaining about their neighbors. And nobody likes to complain about the person they live next to in a way that the person they live next to can hear them. And so you have that. That's the same. It'll be about as difficult to enforce as the dog ordinance, or the dog running at large ordinance, or the cat running at large ordinance. So you can pass it. It will be on the books, and what's going to happen, I predict, is the chief and the other animal control people are going to be stuck with, well, chasing a white tail as opposed to their own tail. But and I'm not making light of it. This is a problem that we see across the country as human beings have encroached on nature. We have out west, you have cougars, you have bears, you have other animals that have found it easier to eat in town than it is to eat in the woods. You live in West Virginia, which is, I believe, the number is about 75% forested, which is astounding if you think about it. So you live in a rural area, and this is one of the, depending on who you are, benefits or detriments of living in a rural area. So the ordinance will be difficult. It is not unenforceable, but it is difficult to enforce. It's going to require neighbors who are willing to testify against their neighbors, and it is going to have unintended consequences, and one of the people that you're going to affect are potentially not my mother-in-law, but somebody's mother-in-law, who's now going to be made a misdemeanant because they put corn and salt out for the deer. But that doesn't mean that they should do it. If council thinks that the problem is so great that this is how we should address it, that's fine. It does not affect people who plant flowers. It's limited to people who, and I thought I'd written it out here good enough, put out grain, fodder, salt licks, fruit, vegetables, nuts, hay, and any other edible material which may be reasonably expected to result in deer feeding. I don't think when you plant your begonias or whatever that you do that with the intent of feeding the deer, but some people may. It also exempts out fruit trees and other live vegetation. That doesn't constitute feeding. So if you plant flowers, we're not going to make a criminal out of you. It exempts out veterinarians, animal control officers, park maintenance staff, or any other county, state, or federal game official who is acting in the course of their duties to deal with animals. It exempts out any food that's placed on property for purposes of trapping or otherwise taking a deer where trapping is legal. And my thought was I'll put that in there because at some point we may pass a municipal deer hunt. And it exempts out people who are putting out, I think there's a lady up here close to 60th Street, and I'm not sure if she's in town or not, that has, horses. But I thought about that, people that have animals that they put out and take care of. As long as those, then the same thing if you put out straw, and this is what I'm talking about with the law of unintended consequences. Whenever you put out hay or straw in order to deal with erosion control or mulching or gardening, those are all things that deer can find to be quite delicious. And it exempts out the penalty for that. It sets in a system where the first time you get a warning, after that and each subsequent time you get an escalating fine. The $25, $50, and $100 I thought reflected the seriousness of the offense, but council, because certainly it's y'all's legislation, not mine. I just am the pen. And it puts a look back provision, meaning that if you do it more than 3 times in 5 years, the third time and every time after, it's a $100 fine. If you want to change who is tasked with enforcement, I put some of the people in because I don't know that do we still have an animal control officer? And if council at some point is going to bring one back, it puts the provision in there. And that's why I didn't really want to have the police doing this, I thought this was something that was better suited to animal control, but we don't, my recollection is we didn't have one. The police have to deal with enough things that they don't need to be chasing, deer or bunnies or whatever. And essentially that's it. I tried to write something simple. It is difficult to enforce these. Ask code enforcement. How do you expect a police officer to go on private property in order to look? Are the neighbors going to cooperate? Do you want a policeman to have to ask you to come and look at the neighbor's property? If not, I'm not going to ask Chief Pfeiffer to, I don't want to be in a position where I have to ask Chief Pfeiffer to send out a police officer to execute a search warrant on a piece of property for somebody that is putting a salt lick out. It takes about 2 to 2.5 hours to write a search warrant, and then you have to get a judge to sign it. And I'm not saying I don't want him to do the work, but we have other issues, I think, that are more deserving of the police force's attention. But again, it is an issue. This is one way to address it. It is not a perfect way to address it. There is probably no perfect way, other than, we all move to somewhere where there are no deer. But this is as good as I could think of.
Yeah, I say wrap this up. We've been spending a lot of time. We got a lot of issues with the city of Vienna besides the deer, but make it's against the law. That's the whole thing. Maybe if it deters one person or two people, hey, it's worth it. I don't want to tie up Chief Pfeiffer's time, but if somebody knows it's against the law to feed a deer, that might help some. That's just an effort, that we thought of, and I thought I'd roll with it. But it's up to you guys. And the fines are fine. Let's just let's move on with this. I say, just wrap her up, Randy. Wrap.
I'm sorry, Mike, forgive me, but I have one more comment to make. Anytime you look at putting something like this in place, the question is it going to make a difference to the problem? Okay, we have 480 acres of park. Our citizens value our parkland, all right? Our parkland attract deer. Our fruit trees attract deer. Is passing an ordinance like this with all the enforcement problems, the burden on whomever's tasked with it, is it going to impact the problem? If, Myrtle up on 60th Street is feeding deer and then it's infecting, I mean, that's a question is, because it may, and that can go from the level of the whole community to the level of one neighbor, because if one neighbor's flowers are getting chomped because the next door neighbor, then that might be a valid consideration. But the question is, is the cost to do it going to offer the remedy that we're seeking, which again, we all agree, we got a lot of deer in Vienna. So that's the last thing I have.
Be an ordinance that would require 2 readings.
It would.
Yes.
It does.
Call for the question, Randy. Let's get this over with.
I just want to make one clarification on what Russ said. We do not have an animal control officer. We contract with the Humane Society for all of our animal issues in conjunction with the police department. And so I am relatively sure that they will not respond to a deer call because they're out trying to put collars on cats, and that's very difficult to do. So at any rate, that's it's going to fall right back on Chief Pfeiffer's men for the enforcement of this. So anything else?
Or Mr. Black with the Parks Department.
Maybe. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the ordinance on first reading prohibiting feeding deer in the city of Vienna?
Well, I don't think anybody.
It's not been moved and
No,
seconded.
it's not
We
been
started
moved and
talking.
seconded. You
before
started the
we
discussion.
called for it.
Hasn't been moved and seconded. Moved and
Oh, that's right. Thank you. I did ask for Mr. Elam's comments.
did.
20 minutes ago. Yeah.
Sorry. Well, Russ, would you like to read this order in its entirety?
I pretty much have.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion for the acceptance of an ordinance prohibiting feeding deer in the city of Vienna and to implement criminal penalties therein, as well as to designate enforcement agencies on first reading.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve an ordinance prohibiting feeding deer in the city of Vienna. Is there any further discussion?
I don't know how.
Hearing none, then I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the ordinance prohibiting feeding deer in the city of Vienna on first reading, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, same sign. All right, thank you. That concludes our agenda this evening. And for the record, that ordinance failed 4-2 That concludes our agenda for this evening. Are there any council comments this evening? Mr. Rogers?
I don't know how many of you were over at the park the last couple of days, but we had a softball tournament for girls softball. There's quite a lot of activity over there. A lot of our restaurants, a lot of our hotels, and motels are filled because of it. It's a great activity. I will say this, that the West Virginia Secondary Schools Activities Commission is seriously thinking of not doing it here anymore. They want to move towards Bridgeport. I think it'll be a bad loss for our community. I hope it's not a loss, and I hope that they will consider things when the bids are put in as far as trying. We've held it for a long time, and it's been very successful here. And the fields have really been modernized over several years to what they are. We hope that the park, Mr. Black, will do some work after our recreation ends this year to enhance fields number 1 and 2. Field 2 was deemed unplayable when the tournament started. However, in the evening, after it dried out and hit 80 some degrees, it did dry out, so the water kind of dissipated and field 2 did become playable. But anyway, as far as I know, Sherman beat Willing Central. Hurricane, I think they are a 5-time winner. It's unbelievable down there as far as what they've done over Washington, and I think Herbert Hoover was the other winner in the tournament. One other comment, I mean, this deer hunting in the city keeps coming up and coming up and coming up. And Sheriff Stevens, when he was counsel, he and I went and talked to the DNR, and we laid out maps of this entire city. And for a deer hunt to occur, DNR says it needs a 3-acre plot, and there is not too many 3-acre plots in the city. The only ones that we found close to that were up around 59th Street, close to the river, and the property owners said they didn't want it. We talked to High Valley University. They said they didn't want to hunt on their property, but I understand negotiations are still continuing to try to get that, maybe sometime in the future, to hunt on their property. I'm glad that North Hills does have one. They have a space where they can do it. It's adjacent to McDonough Wildlife Area, so if we can get everyone up there someday and we'll chase them out of McDonough Wildlife Area when they're having their deer hunt, maybe we can chase them right to them, which would be great. Like I say, deer are a problem. I went to school one day down 34th Street. I looked ahead down 34th Street. I thought there's a bunch of kids out walking in the road. When I got closer, there's about 12 deer walking down 34th Street towards Jackson Park. I know they are a problem. Like I said before, we had a senior the other day. She went out to get her paper on the porch. The deer was on her porch eating her flowers. And she tried to shoo it away, and they kind of looked at her like, yeah, lady, you're crazy. And she went back in the house, and finally when the flowers were all gone, the deer decided to leave, and she went back out and got her paper. But anyway, yes, there is a problem, and I'd like to see it curtailed. I mean, it's wildlife. They do range. McDonough Wildlife is a wildlife sanctuary, and you don't hunt in a wildlife sanctuary. You don't hunt at a zoo. And I don't understand why people keep bringing up McDonough. I mean, he gave us the 110 acres over there for us to enjoy. We've done everything we know to try to keep deer over there. We put ponds, there's 2 ponds out there now. The ponds are put there so that the deer would stay there in that area. There just was a little stream there in the past. Then we made the ponds so that the water would be there so they'd stay in that area. A lot of the property up the valley there from 46th Street, that's not ours. I mean, we can't go out there and put corn or maize or whatever for them to feed on. It's not our property. I don't know what we can do, but I'll tell you this, if you've ever hunted with a bow and arrow, which is the way you'd have to hunt in an urban hunt, you wouldn't want one of those guys sitting 10 feet up in a blind in your backyard. Those razor blades will cut you to pieces. And I don't want them hunting in my backyard. But as far as the DNR is concerned, Sheriff Stevens, then Council Stevens, we went to the DNR, we talked about it. And there is no place in this city to do something that would cause no harm to the citizens. And you know, I'm sorry about it. And I don't know if we're going to have to put up 10-foot fences around our property, keep them away and keep them from eating our flowers or what, but you know, that happens in my backyard. I know it happens in a lot of your backyards. And I'm sorry this ordinance didn't pass, but I mean, we need something on the books. Maybe it would have been a deterrent. I mean, there are some ordinances like cats on a leash. How in the world are you going to try to enforce something like that? I mean, I've got one guy, Mr. Dotson. He had a trap in his back porch. He caught a cat every day. And he called the Parks Department and said, come and get it, because Norm Harris at that time was our Parks Director, and he was our animal warden. And
I tried that too and caught skunks.
So, I mean, they are a problem too. I mean, you know, I got called the other day down on 2nd Street between 32nd and 34th. There was trash all over the place. Still there today. Hopefully it'll be taken care of sometime soon. But, I mean, there are problems. And maybe we can all as a community get together and raise enough heck that, say it politely, well, maybe something can be done about it. Thank you.
Any other council comments?
Just a quick update, Mayor. I mean, kind of following up what Greg was talking about, the remediation work on the riverside is done, okay? What remains is just putting in topsoil. We do no longer require the licensed remediation specialists on site. Basically now it's to backfill, straw seed, and then that parcel will be finished. And we're working hard to get busy on the production side to get the same little bit of work done.
If I can add to that, Jim, Chemours started today. They've moved equipment in to start building the carbon filters for wells 7 and 8. You'll see a mini excavator there where they're going to start for the building of that production facility. If you've noticed, on the other side of River Road, we have removed the wells, the pumps and the motors from wells 7 and 8. They have been sent out to be rebuilt, and then the wells will be rehabilitated, and then all of that will be put back together. As soon as the carbon filter building is up and running, then we will bring wells 7 and 8 back online. So there's going to be a lot of congestion in that 34th to 32nd to 28th Street area, because we're going to run a new water line to improve the infrastructure from well 7 and 8 all the way to 28th Street and tie in with the line that we installed when we paved 28th Street. So it's a 90-day contract. In the next 90 days, you're going to see a lot of activity down there. River Road's going to be very congested. We are going to shut River Road off at certain peak times, but we'll try to let all the media know and post it everywhere on social media so that you can avoid that area. But all of that activity has started, And so, for the next 90 days, there will be a lot of work going on down there. As Jim spoke about the Manville, Spencer's Landing, hopefully tomorrow, all of the topsoil will be installed, and we will be taking the gates down. So for anyone that wants to use Spencer's Landing over the holiday to visit the memorial down there for the veterans, it will be open. And so everything should be relatively cleaned up. It'll just be a little while for the grass to come back. Okay?
I was down at Spencer's Landing today. Most of that work's already been done.
Yes. Tomorrow morning, they just have to put the good topsoil on so the grass will grow, and then it's a matter of let nature take its course and grow good grass. So, Jim, thank you for all your efforts on that. I know you've stayed right on that to get all the paperwork completed, and I appreciate you doing that. So, I have one last comment that I'd like to make to you all this evening. I find it very interesting that the city of Vienna continues to be blessed with not only outstanding people, but accolades from around the state of West Virginia. As Bruce commented, we've had probably, I don't know how many thousand visitors in for the state softball tournament, but it was huge, an incredible amount of people. And so I hope that we're able to retain that tournament for a long time in the future, because those people came everywhere from Bluefield to Martinsburg, Wheeling. I mean, it was just phenomenal, the people that came. And so the rankings again came out for this year. So for 2019, the city of Vienna has been named the #3 city in the entire state of West Virginia for quality of life. We rank behind Bridgeport and Hurricane, but there are 230 cities in the state of West Virginia, and to be ranked third best out of that entire group is quite a statement for the city that you all live in. And I don't know if you had a chance to follow the news, but our own Chief Pfeiffer received a tremendously deserved award. He was given the Gary Deem Award for longevity for your service career. Am I saying that right, Steve? That's a title?
The Gary D. Lifetime Achievement.
Lifetime Achievement Award based on Mike's career. And I think that's fantastic that we have someone in our city that brings that kind of accolades from his fellow officers and from the way he's carried himself over his almost 20-year career. So, Mike, congratulations. I really think that's a terrific thing. Okay?
Mayor. Sheriff Stevens, I didn't see you come in. Thank you. You and I talked to the DNR about a deer hunt, did we not? I mean, I want to make sure that everyone here knows that you and I went there and talked to the DNR, and the only place that we could figure out was either a High Valley College or there was a couple lots on 59th Street, and that was it. And the people on 59th Street didn't want people to hunt on their property. And as far as I know, when we talked to High Valley University at that time, they did not want hunting on their property either, right? Correct. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. And my last comment, okay? Just for the public, we think we've worked out all the details for the deer hunt. Mike, we're working out, one of our former police officers is going to head that up. Henry, we've worked with the city of North Hills extensively because they've done it several times. We've reached out to the city of Parkersburg because they have a deer hunt every year. So we're gathering information as far as the rules go and how to administer this. But I have every hope that we are going to have a deer hunt this fall. We don't have the dates specifically narrowed down yet, but we have to apply with the DNR for this by August the 1st, and we've got everything in place now in order to get this done. So, Bruce, we will work our best to get the deer hunt done this year, okay? I'm very encouraged. Mike, are you?
Yeah, it sounds favorable.
I think we've got it done this time, so anyway.
This former police officer, he's not arranging it so he's the only guy that can hunt these deer, correct?
No, he's not. He's including his family members and
He's a
fellow police
lousy
officers. So, all right. All right. Thank you all for coming this evening. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you for saving the fun things to talk to people intruding on my space. See ya.
Hi. Just great.
Couple questions.
Hang on one second. Where'd Teresa go? Back where? Teresa Smith.
Mr. Ed?
Would you turn it off? Thank you.
We don't now know, honey.